Welcome to the IND podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Dunicic. Before we begin, I want to remind you to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join our growing international community. Now, for today's report, we're going to go a little bit back in time to January 5th of 2020. And we're going to go to the East African state of Kenya. Now, the event that we're going to be focusing on is an attack on a U.S. military base, specifically the one in Manda Bay, that was carried out by Al-Shabaab militants 2 years ago, or 2+ years ago. Now, the reason that we're focusing on this attack, which has become dated and is relatively old and is not any kind of news, is that a U.S. military probe that was released today has found that the attack resulted in more casualties and allowed for major vulnerabilities to be used and exploited by the Al-Shabaab militant group because of complacency or a general lack or a feeling for a need of extra security. Now, just to give you some background on the story. Now, the Manda Bay is one of the U.S. military's key bases in Eastern Africa, specifically in Kenya. Now, 2 years ago, on January 5th, this base was attacked by Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is a militant-terrorist organization that originates in Somalia. It is a fundamentalist Islamic radical group that is associated with and is a branch off of Al-Qaeda. Now, Al-Shabaab, more specifically, roughly 30 to 40 militants carried out an attack on January 5th on this military base. Now, there is nothing new with militant groups carrying out attacks on U.S. bases throughout the world, whether it occurs in Kenya, in Somalia, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. This is something that has been occurring for decades in the past. But there was something very different about this attack. Now, the United States forces that responded to this attack did successfully manage to liquidate and neutralize all of the attacking militant combatants and the subsequent attack that would be carried out by Al-Shabaab. And technically, it was a victory for the U.S. government that was attacked. Nonetheless, 40 militants managed to actually get inside a U.S. air base, kill 3 United States civilians, 2 civilians, 1 military personnel, and the 2 civilians that were killed were private military contractors. They also managed to damage 6 aircraft. This was an unprecedented amount of damage that typically is a major failure on the end of militant groups. So how was this one so comparatively successful? Now, the U.S. probe that was recently launched of this year found that the U.S. forces that were in the Manda Bay military base were simply becoming complacent. Now, what this means by complacency is simply that they did not view a threat or any kind of potential threat or attack occurring on this specific base. They felt, we're in Kenya, no one's going to attack us. We're in a beautiful resort town. We're going to enjoy ourselves. There's no kind of war here. There is conflict, but it's not concerning us. No one is going to actually attack us. Now, in addition to this complacency, the military base's response was actually very lackluster, having to rely on U.S. Marines from a base 1 mile down the road, a completely different base, Camp Simba, to come to their aid at the Camp Manda military outpost, or at the Manda Bay military outpost. Now, basically what had occurred is that there was intelligence information speculating of a potential Al-Shabaab attack on the Manda Bay base. And what they were specifically targeting, or what this intelligence report demonstrated, was that Al-Shabaab militants had the intention of taking out United Nations aircraft, or any aircraft that were owned by UN countries, which is pretty much any country, period, right? Any advanced nation. Now, the reality is that this report was completely ignored. Quote, by an intelligence officer from the Manda Bay base, quote, because we get these kind of reports all the time that Al-Shabaab is going to attack. It never does. And look, that is factual. Other terrorist attacks have occurred that actually had intelligence showing that they would happen. Now, many people have gone to conspiracy theories and stated, well, the government knew it was going to happen, but they just let it happen. The reality is there are countless intelligence reports demonstrating that a terrorist attack is going to occur. The reality is they never do. One of the reasons for this is simply because intelligence agencies can be overly proactive and gain information that fundamentally is inaccurate. Or two, terrorist organizations intentionally produce information that is pointing towards an attack that will never occur. So when intelligence agencies do find information for an attack that is definitely going to occur, they're just going to put it in the pile with the rest of the fake attacks, stating there's no way this is going to happen. Now, adding on to the information, to the lack of the intelligence response to the threat that existed towards this base, when the attack was actually carried out at 5:20 a.m. by 20 militants first sneaking into the forest surrounding the Manda Bay base, the U.S. security response of the soldiers stationed at the Manda Bay was absolutely abysmal. The vast majority of soldiers did not even engage the attacking force and simply had to rely on backup coming from a special combat operations Marine force coming from Camp Simba, which is a mile down the road. Now, this special combat Marine force, it took them 20 minutes to get to the Manda Bay base. 20 minutes to get to the base and 20 minutes to begin engaging the insurgents. Now, 20 minutes may actually seem like it's a very quick period of time, especially when one is traveling 1 mile, having to get all of their military equipment and prepare to engage in combat. And that is quick. Don't let that be misunderstood. This is not an attack against the Marines who responded. But the reality is in those 20 minutes, the Al-Shabaab militants had managed to move towards the flight path of the airbase and actually get inside some of its buildings, completely compromising the airbase. Now, adding to the absurdity and to the complete failure of the U.S. response to this attack was that from 5:20 a.m. and from the Marine response at 5:40 a.m., the rest of the forces from the Manda Bay base would begin engaging the Al-Shabaab militants. Al-Shabaab would respond by sending more militants to attack the base. And it took until midnight to completely get rid of all of these militants and secure the base in its fullness. This attack lasted from 5:20 a.m. on January 5th to midnight of January 6th, or midnight January 5th going into January 6th. I don't know how people count what day midnight is. Anyways, this has led, one, the lackluster intelligence response and the lackluster combat defense response has led to the people that were involved in the organization of this base in having reprimandal formal actions taken against them. Typically some kind of written statement or a written reprisal for what happened. Now, the people that have been held responsible for dropping the ball, if you will, range from low-ranking enlisted airmen to high-ranking non-general officers. And understand that for an officer, any kind of written reprimand can be absolutely career-ending in the military. So there have been consequences for what occurred. Now, in addition to this, the U.S. military has increased the defenses around the Manda Bay camp and has put all of the soldiers on high alert. And they have done this around Kenya. Now, the reality is this situation occurred simply because that the soldiers stationed at this base, enlisted officers, etc., from the lowest to the highest ranks, simply felt that any kind of attack would not happen on their base. Now, the reason that this story today is relevant, even though it's based on something that occurred more than 2 years ago, is the reality that our military forces of any country, whether it's the United States, Germany, Russia's, etc., cannot misunderstand or begin to become complacent and think, okay, I'm stationed in a foreign country, I'm going to enjoy myself instead of actually preparing for the worst. The reality is enemies of military forces are always on the corner. Political situations can shift and they can change. Friends can become rivals. Foes can become combatants. And that reality is ever-changing. Complacency is not something that any political or military actor can afford. An attack can come out of nowhere even when least expected. Before the Al-Shabaab attack that occurred on January 5th of 2020, the Manda Bay base, which has been a U.S. military base for many, many years, had not been attacked in over 16 years. The complacency is fully understandable, though this specific incident demonstrates that complacency is completely unacceptable. Moving forward, the U.S. military will take more precautions and put all of its soldiers all over the world, hopefully, on a higher level of alert. Let me know what you think. Who do you blame for the Manda Bay attacks? Do you blame the U.S. military, or do you think this was just the natural response of young people being sent to deployment in Kenya, which is a beautiful country with a wonderful coastline? Or do you think something else is completely to blame? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you tomorrow.